Good day to everyone. I am Sittie Faisah Caorong, a teacher from Libertad Elementary School, Causwagan, Lanao del Norte. I am here to present my research. So, as we all know, children love to play games. But if we use this method in teaching values education, it will greatly help the learners to improve his moral development. That's why I, as a researcher, developed this study entitled Board Game as Engaging a Learning Tool in Enhancing Pupil Learning on Values Education. Now let's proceed to the introduction or rationale. Schooling and parenting reproduce fundamental structures of the society. However, sometimes fail to inculcate and integrate moral values into the young mind of the learners. As an evidence, bullying weak children are now often happening in every classrooms. In addition, racial discrimination, injustice, and inequalities are common happening in every day in schools. Furthermore, the K-12 curriculum under DepEd Order Number 31 Series 2012 mandated that the Edukasyong Pagpapakatao (ESP) subject needs to teach within 30 minutes period per day. Some of the lessons may take long on delivering the learning competencies or the topics, and because of this shortened time period in teaching ESP subject, this may result to incomplete delivery of the lessons, and it may affect the learning process of the learners. Thus, in this phase of concerns, teachers must have variety of innovative and engaging tools in teaching values education. That's why the board game is one of the solution key to these problems. Board games are really an excellent teaching and engaging tools to easily inculcate the values education into the young mind of the learners. And for us to convince that games can be very useful in teaching, here are some of the benefits of the board game. First, from the viewpoint of crews, board games are a powerful instrument which focuses to improve the critical thinking and problem-solving skills of the learners in order to meet the objective of the curriculum frameworks. At the same time, it encourages collaboration and inquiry that lead on promoting student achievement. Furthermore, using board games as an educational tool can overcome number of barriers in teaching values education, such as it gives more extra time in learning the subject with less instructions and less facilitation on the part of the teachers. Lastly, the leisure time of the learners also can be utilized or consumed in teaching values education through playing board games. Let's move to the research questions. This basic research aims to boost the teaching of values education through board game. Specifically, the study sought to answer the following research questions. First, what is the pupil's achievement in ESP before and after exposing them to lecture method and board game? Second, is there a significant difference in the performance of the learners in ESP before and after exposing them to the following: A. Lecture method, B. Board game. Third, what ESP intervention program can be proposed based on the findings? For the scope and limitation of the research, the study examined the effect of the board game on teaching values education by comparing the control and experimental group. The participants were the pupils from the grade 4 of Libertad Elementary School enrolled in school year 2019 to 2020. Specifically, the learning competencies of the board game to be taught was to show calmness in emotions and actions toward other people. Now we are on the part of research methodology. For the sampling, the first quarter grade in ESP of the grade 4 pupils were determined by their teacher as the basis in selecting the participants by the use of the purposive sampling technique. The participants of this study were 48 grade 4 pupils from Libertad Elementary School. They were randomly divided into two groups, 24 pupils for the control group and 24 pupils for the experimental group. The control group was taught using the lecture method, while the experimental group was exposed to the board game. Next slide, the data collection. This was done in various stages. First, pretest results of the respondents were obtained. Second, control group was exposed to the lecture method while the experimental group was exposed to the board game tool. And during this stage, the experimental group were exposed in board game tool throughout the whole month to make sure that there will be enough and adequate for the exposure in the tool. Third, the post-test results of the respondents were obtained. Lastly, the statistical treatment were calculated. Ethical consideration. For ethical concern that emanated the conduct of research, the researcher had permission from the office of the school division superintendent of Lanao del Norte, and she asked her principal of Libertad Elementary School to conduct the study in her school. Any data that will be consolidated and consequently collated for analysis will be kept confidential. Next, the data analysis. The study employed the quasi-experimental design which utilized the control group to compare the effect of the intervention with the experimental group. The following statistical tools were employed to answer the different problems presented. First, mean and standard deviation. They were used to describe the average and variation of the pretest and post-test score of the respondents between the control and experimental group. Second, per t-test, this was used to determine the paired differences between the pretest and the post-test of the respondents in the control and experimental group. Let's proceed to research results and discussions. For the problem 1, what is the pupil's achievement in ESP before and after exposing them to lecture method and board games? The table below shows the performance of the control group and experimental group. The table 1 indicates that the respondent under the control group in pretest obtained a mean score of 8.92, while the respondents under the experimental group obtained a mean score of 11.13. Both groups are almost similar, result in standard deviation. Thus, it pertains to say both pretests of the control and experimental group do not have enough prior knowledge about the topic. On the other hand, the experimental group obtained a 21.17 mean score under the post-test results, which implies that the learners performs better by exposing them to a board game tool compared to the control group, which obtained an 11.29 mean score. The standard deviation of control group in post-test score has a 4.486 results, which implies that the scores are more scattered compared to the experimental group with 2.436 result. Thus, the result shows that the board game is an effective tool in improving pupils' achievement and values education over lecture method. This proved that using board game, the concept retained because it played over and over again until they mastered the skills, while the lecture method got lesser post-test result due to the shortened time period of teaching ESB subject and inattentiveness of some pupils during this discussion. And for the second problem, results and discussion, is there a significant difference in the performance of the learners in ESP before and after exposing them to A. Lecture method. B. Board game. The table below shows the comparison between the pretest and post-test scores of the control group. The result shows a t-value of -4.656 and a p-values of 0.000. This implies that the aforementioned hypothesis is rejected. The scores of the respondents have improved after exposing them to lecture method. This concludes that there is a significant improvement of the pupils' performance somehow in ESP using the lecture method. And for the board game, the table 3 shows the comparison between the pretest and post-test scores of the experimental group. As you can see, the result shows a t-values of -12.777 and a p-values of 0.000. This implies that the aforementioned hypothesis is rejected. The scores of the respondents also have notably improved after exposing them to the board game. This clarified that there is a highly significant improvement of pupils' performance in ESP using the board game tool. Thus, this proves that this board game tool has contributed to the success in enhancing more the learner's achievement in values education in the study. And for the last problem, problem number 3, what ESP intervention program can be proposed based on the findings? Since the board game tool is more effective compared to the lecture method of teaching, it is further suggested that it should be applied in teaching values education, ensuring to listen to work of the teacher as a facilitator. Furthermore, board game educational tool can be tried out not just on limited time, but on a longer span of learning time. The next slide will be the proposed intervention action plan or program. This is the proposed intervention program. There were two objectives were proposed. First is to provide lax session to empower the teaching of values education through game-based educational materials. Second is to enhance teacher skills on making game-based educational tools in ESP. Both were done and held on November 2019 at the ICT room of Libertad Elementary School. All teachers together with their school principal of the said school were involved. The budget allocated or allotted for the LAC and workshop sessions were funded under the BERF or Basic Education Research Fund. The training proposal also were approved in the division. After the LAC sessions, narrative and attendance were also provided. And for the last part of my research, the research recommendations, results of the study concluded that the board game educational material in teaching values education as alternative tool to lecture method had a positive effect and significantly improved the pupils' performance in ESP based on the data presented. Based on the results of the study, the researcher would like to recommend the following. First, provide teachers workshop or training on the making game-based educational tools on values education and apply it on their learners. Second, after the training, monitoring should be done to determine whether the tools has been applied by the teachers and to know its effect in varied local settings. Third, the board game should be well designed and aligned properly based on the learning competencies or curriculum. To end my presentation today, I would like to leave this inspirational message. Failure doesn't mean the game is over. It means to try again with experience. Quoted by Len Lessinger. Thank you and have a good day.